Hi there, and welcome to Jewish Conservatives on Locals.com with me, Jake Donnelly. In today's spiel, I'm going to talk about the 1776 report that was published by the Trump administration just this morning. Now, for those of you that don't know, the 1776 report is something pretty much made to refute the 1619 Project. The 1619 Project was produced and published by the New York Times, and it stated that the real founding of America was in 1619 on the very first day that a slave stepped foot on the North American continent. The 1776 report says, no, that's wrong. And here's the thing. The 1776 report is correct. Just from a historical perspective, the 1776 report is correct. That is because the 1619 Project is a historical bullcrap. Historians from all walks of life have come together to ridicule and point out the inaccuracies of the 1619 Project. Whereas the 1619 Project used revisionist history and secondary and tertiary documents to try to prove its point, the 1776 report is almost exclusively primary documents. And when you're writing a history, that's the best way to go about it. Let the history speak for itself. So, in the 1776 report, that's exactly what it does. It lets those who lived and experienced the history and founding of America speak for themselves, both the good and the bad. That means this, piece of propaganda published by the Trump administration is a piece of propaganda unlike which we have not seen in quite some time. It is a piece of propaganda that simply peddles in truth. You can read it for yourself, and you can see the quotations from people like Thomas Paine and George Washington, and of course, Frederick Douglass, as well as lesser-known people like Elizabeth Cady Stanton. You can go and see their words for yourself. You can read them. You can understand what they were thinking more than 200 and almost now 50 years ago. That is why I love the 1776 Project. It does not cover over the warts. It goes in depth, in fact, on the sins of America. So does it talk about slavery at the founding? You betcha. Does it talk about the terrible people, the racists like John C. Calhoun? Yes, it does. In fact, the 1776 report, when it goes in depth on the anti-American sentiments throughout America's history, it allows those people who held these anti-American ideas and philosophies, it allows those people to speak for themselves. So, when it comes to somebody like John C. Calhoun, a proponent of slavery, it allows John C. Calhoun to speak for himself. It quotes John C. Calhoun so you can see his words. And then the 1776 report does a wonderful job of connecting the philosophy, of John C. Calhoun, the philosophy of Calhoun and slavery, to the modern day notion of identity politics. Because John C. Calhoun was engaging in identity politics of a different kind, trying to prop up the white race. He was a white supremacist before the idea of white supremacy was ever a thing. And now you can see how the people that are engaging in identity politics today, they're doing the same thing as John C. Calhoun. And in fact, the people that are engaging in identity politics today are going against the philosophies and ideas of somebody like Martin Luther King Jr. Whereas Martin Luther King Jr. wanted equality of opportunity, the people of today who love identity politics, they want equality of outcome. That, quite simply, is identity politics of John C. Calhoun for the new century. That's all it is. So when they talk about slavery, they bring up the words of John C. Calhoun. When they talk about identity politics, they talk about John C. Calhoun. But when they go against other anti-American ideas and philosophies like progressivism, they don't just say, hey, this is what progressivism is. No, they quote Woodrow Wilson and what he says about progressivism and how with progressivism, it will live outside the bounds of the three co-equal branches of government, that they will legislate outside of the principles of the founding of the United States of America. And again, you don't have to trust me on this. You can go and you can see the words of Woodrow Wilson. You can see them outside of the 1776 report, but they're much easier to understand within the context of the 1776 report. So slavery, bad, brought up by the 1776 report. Progressivism, bad, brought up by the 1776 report. But also, when it comes to stuff like communism and by extension socialism, do they just say, ooh, socialism, communism, bad? No, they quote liberally from Karl Marx. They use Karl Marx's words against him to show how communism and socialism are anti-American ideas. These are the ideals that do not belong in America. It is a wonderful document produced and published by the Trump administration. And the reason that I love it so much for a place like Jewish conservatives is because it talks about the internal dangers that America faces very much in the same way that Judaism is faced with internal dangers from, in my opinion, those on the left. Because Reform Judaism doesn't really have a lot to say about traditional Judaism. In fact, the foundational principles of Judaism day after day are getting chipped away by those who believe in Reform Judaism, which happens to be the vast majority of American Jews. Somebody like me, I look at Orthodox Judaism and I say, okay, I like your philosophy, I like your values. I just don't think that I can attain those in modern day America. However, I look at Reform Judaism and I say, I don't like those ideas. I do not like that philosophy because it really doesn't have anything to do with the founding of Judaism. The same way that the 1619 Project and its ahistorical bullcrap has nothing to do with the founding of America. So when you're talking about the beauty of the American ideal, you have to talk about both the good and the bad. That is why I love the ending to the 1776 report. The 1776 report allows Frederick Douglass to speak for himself. Frederick Douglass, a man that was born into slavery, who initially condemned the U.S. Constitution, they use a block quote from him to explain exactly why the U.S. Constitution is so good. Because the ideals and principles found in the United States Constitution are worth fighting for. And they are worth fighting for always. That, according to Frederick Douglass, a man born into slavery. And if he can look at the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and say that this country that initially had him in actual bondage, this country that put him in chains at the day he was born, if this country is worth fighting for, if the philosophies are worth fighting for at all times and forever into the future, if that man, Frederick Douglass, can say that, then nobody alive today can say that this country is not worth fighting for, that these principles and the foundation of America are not worth fighting for. They absolutely are. And every man, woman, and child should fight for them now and into the future. Well, thank you for tuning in to another day here on Jewish Conservatives with me, Jake Donnelly. Please do whatever you can to support this page if you like it. And hey, even if you don't, but still want to see some content that you can argue with, also support the page, whether that means monetarily or with thoughts, ideas, or actions. I don't care. Just tell me what you think of this page and please support. But for now, this is Jake Donnelly with Jewish Conservatives on locals.com saying, until next time, folks, see ya.